Welcome everyone, and a special welcome to our panelists who's joined us here today. I've had the pleasure of meeting these panelists prior to today's session, and they come with very heavy bios. That means we will definitely have an insightful session together and really talking about a topic that's on everyone's mind, and that is the case for industrial energy efficiency. It really was derived from a recent report that the energy efficiency movement had launched recently, and it goes into a deep dive on economic and climate impacts of the energy efficiency measures. And I think what an appropriate time to speak about this, given that we've got COP28 ahead of us. Before we go into a deep dive of our topic, I think it's really important for me to introduce our panelists. And we have Mike Umika, who's the Managing Director for the Energy Efficiency Movement. We have Laura Marie Tuffler, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Western Europe from Microsoft. We also have representation from IEA, that is Brian Motherway, who's the Head of Energy Efficiency there. We have representation from Alpha Laval, Julien Junitir, who is the VP for Energy Division, and I am Sumaya Bawani, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. I think there's no underestimating the challenges the industry is facing when it comes to energy efficiency, and how are we going to really meet this global decarbonization targets while addressing the global demands. In the recent report that was launched by the Energy Efficiency Movement, we have received extremely positive comments, not only from the media, but from various stakeholders that has been shared who's joined the movement. And there are some key insights in this report that gives us some actions, and to name 10 of them that will really help us to address some of these challenges that we're facing in the industry. And today we'll have our panelists helping us to unpack some of these actions, really sharing some best practices already in terms of their organizations and how we are looking to really advance energy efficiency and really making that change that's really needed right now. So in order for us to kick things off, I speak about energy efficiency movement, I speak about this report, but let's watch a short video to shed some more insights and give us an overview on the energy efficiency movement.
What can one drop of water do? What about 2 or 3? The smallest of actions can accomplish much if done consistently and with purpose. Sometimes we think we're too small to do anything, to mean anything. What will happen if we continue down the same path, doing the same things we've always done? Ignoring the problem won't solve it. The energy efficiency movement brings together like-minded stakeholders, working toward a more energy-efficient world. Through knowledge sharing, adoption of energy-efficient technologies, smarter investments, and better regulations and incentives, decarbonization can be achieved faster, enabling a brighter future for all. It takes just one step to change direction, to put us on a better path with a vision for the future. What can one person do? One company, 2 companies. Understanding the reality of a situation is the first step towards solving it. If you haven't joined us yet or require information, visit energyefficiencymovement.com.
What an insightful video, and I hope that this is giving you some more insights into the energy efficiency movement. But let's shift gears to Mike Umika, who's here today, and he can really share some more insights on how it actually works and why should we be focusing on this energy efficiency movement, Mike?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm also very excited to be here with this panel. So the whole energy efficiency movement started almost 2 years ago to drive awareness around energy efficiency. But soon we realized that there is a wider ecosystem than just within the ABB ecosystem. So Alfa Laval was one of the first companies that wanted to join the energy efficiency movement. And since then, the whole movement really grew nicely, as it also is supposed to be. So today we can proudly say we are more than 400 companies, including Microsoft, obviously Alfa Laval, DHL, T-Mobile, and many small SMEs that also make an important difference for the movement as such. The movement obviously has a key focus to become and have the ambition for being a voice of industry when it comes to energy efficiency. The energy efficiency first principle launched by the IEA is one of our key messages as well, because that's really where we can make a difference. The energy efficiency movement as such focuses on three things. One is about saving energy, reducing cost, and the third is also reducing the CO2 emission. So I'm very excited and looking forward for this session today.
And congratulations on this wonderful report that, as I mentioned earlier on, is getting such great coverage and media publicity. In terms of your learnings about this report, is there anything that you want to shed some more light with our viewers on?
Yes, I mean, first of all, so on this side, I would like to say thank you, companies, to Alfa Laval and Microsoft for the great contribution, as well as the IEA, helping us and setting the scene in the right way for this report. The report is based on the energy efficiency playbook that was released 1 year ago, which was just a high-level 10 key actions report. But what it was lacking at that time was the in-depth. So what are now the climate and economical impacts? And now, this year, we were really able to get their numbers into it. And it's massive. So if you follow these 10 key actions, you can save, or we can save as a society globally in the industrial space around 11% of CO2, which is more than 4 gigatons, or in other words, it's roughly 60% of the combustion engine cars that we can take out of operation by 2030. So it's a massive number, and the whole report is built up on 3 levels. It's about the energy efficiency foundation, it's about driving its return, and it's about energy efficiency insights. So it's a very exciting report that we just could release.
That's fantastic, and some really, really impressive statistics that you've just shared now. I think it'll be really good to hear from Microsoft, and I know, Laura Marie, you're on standby for this question that you can help us solve here. But could you tell us a little bit about how Microsoft sees the role of energy efficiency when it comes to climate action, and particularly digital technology, and how that plays a role in achieving it?
Sure. Now, of course, happy to. And you mentioned 2 key words here, Samaya, right? Sustainability and energy efficiency. And we really see those as 2 sides of the same coin, if you will. So if you imagine decarbonization to be a bit like a puzzle, right? Then the dirty secret is the pieces of the puzzle have vastly different sizes, unlike your usual toy shop puzzle. So the biggest piece is energy, right? As Mike just mentioned, makes up around 73% of the problem. So for us at Microsoft, that has some very real implications for what we do as a company and what we do for our partners and our customers. So maybe on the first piece on getting our own house in order, we set ourselves some bold targets to become carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste by 2030. And that starts with transforming our data centers to become highly energy efficient. Right, so for example, we've been spearheading new power purchase agreements all over the globe to slash carbon emissions that come from electricity generation. I mean, think about it, right? When the grid relies on carbon-free energy, the energy used on homes, in businesses, and in entire industries becomes inherently more efficient in terms of reducing emissions. So at Microsoft, we see this synergy, if you will, between decarbonization and energy efficiency as a cornerstone for climate leadership. And so we've been really gearing up to work with energy suppliers around the globe to procure renewable energy in the grids where we operate. So that now brings our current portfolio of carbon-free energy to almost 14 gigawatts. So to put that into perspective, that's enough to power the Eiffel Tower's lighting for around 1,700 years, or providing well over 1 million households with clean energy, right? But the reality is procuring renewable energy year by year alone is not enough, right? So that's why we announced our 100-100-0 commitment. So meaning 100% of our electricity consumption, 100% of the time, will be matched by zero carbon energy purchases. And now the key to making that happen, right, Mike, I think you mentioned it, is really partnerships. No one can do it alone. So we work with other companies to enable others to procure renewable energy at scale. So through initiatives like the Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance, or of course the energy efficiency movement. And I'm a big fan of think global, act local, right? So we've teamed up with our Swedish partner Vattenfall here to launch the first commercial solution on the Microsoft Cloud that does zero carbon energy matching for our Swedish data centers 24/7 on an hourly basis. And so Vattenfall can now offer this to companies they're working with so they can match their consumption with carbon-free energy. Which really brings me to the flip side of the coin here, since Samaya, you asked, how do we work with our customers and help them become more energy efficient faster? Yeah, I think that's why we've developed a set of technology tools that organizations can use, such as our sustainability reporting software or our emissions impact dashboard on the cloud, so they can get a 360-degree view of their energy and sustainability data alongside their financial and business activity data, all in one place and in real time. So you can slash your energy waste, you can slash your emissions, and do so in the most price competitive way. And that data foundation, if you think of it, is very important from a compliance perspective, because the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or in short CSRD, is around the corner, and the cost of doing nothing is skyrocketing. But at the same time, companies are starting to build their own green product offering, and they're tapping into data analytics and AI to make it happen. So if you take manufacturers and energy companies we work with, right, they're using their ESG data to run AI models on top to optimize their material mixes or their fuel mixes to be greener and more energy efficient for their customers, like in green steel, for example. So Maya, to your point, optimizing your energy efficiency, in my mind, isn't just about taking effective climate action. There's also a customers of customers play here, because what might be your compliance data today then becomes a tool for business growth, because it gives you that analytics foundation to unlock entirely new AI-driven revenue streams and cost savings at a scale, right, that was simply unimaginable before.
Thank you so much, Laura Marie. I think it's really impressive to see how Microsoft is investing so significantly when it comes to sustainability, and how you're working with companies to really help them to optimize their energy efficiency. You've mentioned a lot about the journey, right? And I think how you've also mentioned a bit about data. You've also mentioned a little bit about physical assets in there. So if I have to ask you to summarize, which really ties back to two actions in our report that falls into the Microsoft wheelhouse, how would you summarize how data can help companies on their energy efficiency journey, especially when we think about IoT integrated into that?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, in the end, right, sustainability is also a data problem at the core, because the simple truth is you can't improve what you don't measure. So whether it's pinpointing your energy efficiency savings, streamlining how you're running your operations, and connecting your physical assets to optimize electricity, it all starts with aggregating a ton of operational, financial, environmental data all into one unified data estate. So I kind of like to think of it this way. The Windows operating system became the connecting glue for the software world. right? Reliable data will become that operating system for the business of sustainability and for the business of energy efficiency, for that matter. So to your point, Samaya, on action 10, right? Fun fact, simply moving your data to the cloud improves your energy efficiency by up to 98%. Now, here's the thing. The part that is not out of the box is your data itself. So take steelmaker ArcelorMittal, manufacturer Siemens, or Alfa Laval for that matter, since we have Julien with us today. What do they all have in common? They all have a huge amount of data they need to collect on their energy, on their water, on their waste, right, across different systems, different data sources internally, and even globally dispersed entities externally, like your mom and pop shop suppliers. So my point is, the key barrier to become more energy efficient faster is fragmentation, right? Because your data is typically not sitting within one source, but it's all over the place with your Excel, with your email. Some might be coming from different energy management solutions. Some might come from your IoT devices. The data transformation requirements are enormous. And that's where data analytics and AI can help. And that's why we at Microsoft are helping customers lay the right data foundations to break down those silos, if you will, right? So they can get that unified view of their data all in one place. And a great example here we've been working with is Finnish steelmaker Outokumpu, for example. So they've been taking bold steps to move away from what we might call gut feel type of decisions and make data core to how they run their business. So they use data from machines in their largest factory in Finland to help close the skills gap between those who've been making stainless steel for decades and those who are new to the industry. So by running advanced data analytics on the Microsoft cloud, they slashed their energy use by 10%. Their factory output went up by 4%, all while slashing CO2 because the company saved a great deal on electricity, on energy, and on time of actually running their operations. So in my mind, really helping redefine, right, not just the steel industry, but how all industries connect the dots between energy efficient outcomes, better top line growth, and fewer physical risks. And Samaya, you also mentioned, I think in the same sentence here, the impact of IoT is something that struck you. I think that's action 2 in the playbook now. I think if you take Spanish telco company Telefonica here, so they manage around 6.5 billion messages a day. Now that's a ton of data to sort through when something goes wrong, you think of it. So at Microsoft, we've been working with them to build an IoT hub to run data analytics on the cloud. So Telefonica is able to unlock a two-way flow of data so they can predict any connectivity issues and deliver fixes directly to the customer, right? So remotely and in real time. Now, if you think of it, that boosts customer retention. It cuts costs, to Mike's point, and so frees up much needed capital in times where margins are being squeezed. So at the same time, it also slashes their carbon footprint because the company, again, saves big on energy, on emissions from sending their teams back and forth to specific sites for troubleshooting. So really combined, this translates into millions of euros in cost savings. And if we circle back to what we just talked about in terms of CSRD regulation coming up in January, it's also a smart risk management practice. So really, it's all about the ability to manage that risk effectively, right? And pinpoint any optimization gaps in real time so you can add some speed to implementing your energy efficiency targets. So in my mind, what you've just mentioned, Samaya, right? How are the 2 points connected here? That is really what makes the combination of unified data and IoT so powerful here.
Thank you, Laura Marie. I think there's some really phenomenal best practices that you've shared there across some organizations. So extremely insightful. And maybe just elaborating a little bit on the target side, let's shift gears to Brian. And thinking about COP28, given the climate negotiations that will occur there with both the representations from private and public sector, we know that when we look at the global stocktake, when it comes to the progress around these targets that they've put forward, there is somewhat a bit of a delay. But the IEA has considered energy efficiency the first fuel when it comes to energy transition, right? And I think my question to you here is, can energy efficiency provide a jump start when it comes into action when we look at some of those targets?
So we call energy efficiency the first fuel because we really see it as the first place to look for either companies or indeed countries looking to really have a solid impact on their emissions, their sustainability, and of course their energy cost base. Our minds often go to the supply side and think about where we're getting our energy from, and we think about our investment in renewables, all very important. But actually looking at how we use energy and how we can become more efficient, very often, I would say 9 times out of 10, offers the early opportunity to reduce the environmental impact and, of course, to reduce costs. And we see that at a company level, at individual level, and at national and international level. And particularly if you look at our modeled pathway towards net zero energy systems of the future, it starts today in this decade with a really strong focus on energy efficiency, on electrification, and on greater investment in renewables, particularly in the power system. Those three measures together make up the bulk of the emissions abatement between now and 2030, and energy efficiency, of course, is at the heart of all of that. Not only that, but as well as the direct savings you get from energy efficiency in environmental and economic terms, it makes the whole clean energy transition and decarbonisation project more affordable and more achievable, because it shrinks the size of the energy system. It shrinks how much energy we all need to live comfortable, healthy, successful, prosperous lives. And therefore, the amount of investment we need in grids, in infrastructure, in energy supply itself, all comes down and makes the clean energy transition more doable across the board for all of us. And that's why there's really no pathway towards net zero, towards carbon-free energy systems of the future, that doesn't start with a strong emphasis on energy efficiency. And I think while energy efficiency doesn't always get the same attention in policy circles as maybe someone like me would like to see it get, I think in the last couple of years we have seen an increasing focus. First of all, I think there's a growing realization as we look at the narrowing, not closed, but narrowing pathway towards net zero, particularly towards the 1.5 degrees target. We realize that it's not achievable without a strong focus on efficiency, or certainly it'll be a lot more expensive and more difficult, more challenging without a focus on efficiency. And I certainly know, talking to both people in industry and people in government, that that's becoming more understood, that without energy efficiency at the heart of our plans, we won't achieve our goals. And secondly, I must say that in the last 18 months, in the context of very high energy prices, much stronger focus on energy security and resilience, that's only amplified further the focus on energy efficiency, and the realization that the less energy we need to do our business, to live our lives, the more resilient and secure and self-sufficient we are. And all of that has put a lot of more focus on energy efficiency at a policy and a behavioral level. And since the start of the energy crisis in early 2022, countries representing 3/4 of the global economy have either introduced new or strengthened existing energy efficiency policies. And we see that following through in terms of investment, in terms of action, even in terms of consciousness. So I think COP is a really important moment. We have a focus on the target of doubling energy efficiency progress in this decade. It's something that we were able to reinforce recently at our annual Global Energy Efficiency Conference that the IEA convened here in France just a few months ago, where 46 governments came together and asserted their commitment to the doubling target. So I'm really optimistic that COP can take that to the next level and really focus this global spotlight on energy efficiency, and to bring benefits to all of our lives as we move towards our clean energy targets.
I think you make a very bold point there to say that we're doubling the rate of energy efficiency movements. And I think you also mentioned previously that you're going to triple the level of investment to help really achieve this net zero focus that you're on. When you think about the report and some of the actions that we've put into this report, is there anything there that you can perhaps highlight that will help us to achieve this target?
I think I commend the report's focus on industry, first of all, because apart from anything else, industry is a huge sector. It's really central to our journey towards sustainability and towards carbon-free energy systems and towards the journey towards 1.5 degrees. So we really need to focus on energy efficiency in industry as a crucial early action. But of course, many of the actions in industry highlighted in the report make economic sense in themselves. You know, energy efficiency is an economically rational action. And I think many people who don't work in the sector are constantly surprised by how much inefficiency still exists in industry. Despite economically rational decisions being made every day, there's always opportunity to become more efficient. And that's why I think the focus on a systematic approach, thinking about energy audits, thinking about looking for the energy efficiency opportunities is really important. The way you lock in energy efficiency into business thinking, into strategic decision making is really important. I also think the focus on digitalization and those kind of solutions that Lara Marie has already spoken about is really important, because for me, we're entering into a new paradigm for energy efficiency powered by digitalization, where whole new levels of optimization in our lives, in our buildings, in our offices, in our industries are being made possible by digital solutions, but also a new way of thinking about energy as a system. Energy efficiency is no longer just about how much energy I use, but overall optimizing economically and environmentally the whole system. And all of that is unlocked by the power of digitalization and the innovation that's coming from companies every day. So I think we're moving into a new phase of opportunity around energy efficiency, where we need to unlock huge amounts of potential as quickly as possible.
And we can see some of these potential being unlocked by some best case scenarios that was handled out by Lara Marie. So it's really great to see Microsoft and IEA already collaborating and sharing similar thoughts and insights on this very important topic. Let's shift gears to Alfa Laval, and I think I'm reflecting back on two actions from the report, 7 and 8. And I think while we talk about electricity, we do know that there's a related concept around heat. And I think when you think about heat exchangers and heat pumps, this is two very key areas for you, Julian, at Alfa Laval. What's the energy efficiency potential for these two areas when we think about both industrial and commercial players here?
Thanks, Sue. No, I will start a bit just to take the big picture, and I think it's very important to progress in a systematic manner, and the report guides that, and Brian underlined that you need to be strategic when you look at doing the audit, doing the mapping, identify the right actions and the right opportunity. And these right opportunity can be identified and very well supported by digitalization. Some very good example given by Laura Marie here. And you will find these opportunities in saving energy in form of electricity or heat, because this is definitely the two sides of the same coin of energy. It's either electricity or heat. And as individuals, we get to know that more and more now, with heat pumps for domestic usage becoming the most common heating form here in Europe, particularly accelerated after the crisis in Ukraine in the last winter. But it is also very relevant in the same way in the industry. We see heat pumps being more and more commonly used in the industry. Decarbonization of heating also comes with the electrification of heating in different forms. But in total, what the reports highlight, because Mike said it, the quality of this report is also to put some figures on those opportunities, is that just on heat alone, we have identified in the industry the potential to save up to 700 million tons of CO2 per year up to 2025, and over 1 billion per year all the way to 2030. So it's a substantial contribution for energy efficiency on the heat side that we can come with only those two recommendations.
And I think that's great to look at that positive output in terms of what the potential is there. But we do know there's challenges, right? I think it's a topic that we can't deny, some of the challenges facing when it comes to heat exchangers, heat pumps, and really driving that greater efficiency. How best can we overcome some of these challenges, Julian?
I would say it's not that difficult to identify on the heating side, at least the heat losses, and it's getting less and less difficult now with the help of digitalization, because we have thermal camera for a couple of €100. You can connect a thermal camera to your phone and identify the heat losses. Further analytics with correct IoT can also, of course, further support these analytics and identify where am I losing heat in my processes. The challenge comes on the heat reuse. Where can I reuse that heat? And that's where the use of experts like energy auditors is needed in order to make the right decision. Typically, you need to do a pinch analysis so you can increase the temperature profile to start connecting the right heat flows with the right heat reuse opportunity. You, of course, also need to monitor the new technologies, because there are progress in industrial heat pumps, there are progress in organic Rankine cycle technologies that are yielding and more higher efficiency as times progress. But also, when it comes to heat reuse, it's a lot about finding sector coupling. And here the governments are required to support, usually more regionally, to find how can you couple an excess heat industry with, for example, a district heating opportunity that is close by. And that sector coupling is one of the calls for action we have towards the policymaker in order to open the possibility to further use heat that might be at a lower grade or perceived as a lower grade for the industry to be reused within the plant, but instead selling it or at least using it in the subsequent district heating network that is close by.
Thank you, Julian. So maybe let's shift back to you, Laura Marie. I know that Julian's talking a bit more about the technology and hardware, but if you have to go back to your points, which you elaborated on when it comes to data and AI to drive efficiencies, when we look at connecting innovative hardware and technologies with this latest drive around AI and data, how do we drive energy efficiency here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Samaya, because I think it strikes right at the heart of how we can actually unlock entirely new business models of energy efficiency. Brian mentioned it here, right? We are entering a new phase of energy efficiency. I think that's spot on. I couldn't agree more. And a great example here is waste, right? In fact, I'd like to think of it as waste is your new cash cow. Julian mentioned it, reusing heat, great example. Right? We can now valorize excess heat. Brian mentioned energy security. So let's take the energy crisis. Right? If you don't have Russian gas, you have waste, and you can make electricity from waste. So a great example here is tech company Luminescent that makes a new type of heat engine that drives efficiency up by 25% in the heat recovery market. I mean, that's something that was completely unfeasible before. And if there's excess heat somewhere, companies will want to capture that because you can make more electricity. Now, that's a promising new business model, not only for our energy companies and manufacturers we work with, but also for Microsoft itself, right? Because our data centers generate Scope 2 emissions through heat, through electricity, through steam. So that's roughly a quarter of our emissions. Now imagine if you can capture that to generate clean electricity, you actually become your own supply chain. Now that quickly translates into millions in cost savings, but you can then use AI to run dynamic demand forecasting on your operational data. So you can react to any global supply demand fluctuations in your energy mix in real time, but with a fraction of the cost, all while slashing CO2 emissions because you're saving on electricity, on energy, and on how you're running your operations, right? Or let's take CO2 itself. I mean, carbon is not all evil, right? In fact, it's the new raw material. So if you think of carbon removal and direct air capture, tech companies we work with, like a Climeworks or a Repair. So imagine machines a bit like mechanic trees sucking CO2 out of the air. Like that CO2 that these types of companies capture then enables other industries like sustainable aviation fuels. So take German tech company Narrowtech, for example, that uses captured CO2 as a feedstock to produce all kinds of sustainable fuels. Now, what's brilliant about that, if you're a manufacturer or an energy company, is that you can overlay that carbon and energy data with your financial data, run AI models on top, so you can then optimize not only your fuel mixes or your material mixes to be greener and more energy efficient, but you can do so in the most price competitive way. And that is, in my mind, what the business of circularity is all about, right? It's all about how we connect innovative hardware technologies with data and AI so they can speak to each other, if you will, right? And that way we completely transform how we make money in the hydrocarbons economy.
Yeah. I seem to see a common theme around data being king here in terms of really driving energy efficiency. And I think this is something that is a common theme coming through in terms of all of your messages today. And I think it also needs to be looked into in terms of our supply chain. So when we think about transportation from an industrial materials perspective and the big role emissions play there, we all know this is also another sensitive topic in terms of that fleet management side. So maybe over to you, Mike. Can you talk to us a little bit about the opportunity here and what are we seeing with organizations when we're looking at about the fleet and how are they working towards transportation given the emissions and the role that it plays on the emissions?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously data is here also very important. And if you look a bit into the transportation sector as such, so it consumes around 25% of energy and contributes to 30% of CO2 emissions. And in the transportation environment, obviously we always need to differentiate between the commercial vehicles that we all use nowadays more or less in the private environment versus also the more industrial vehicles. And the beauty of it is obviously that, yes, we see quite many small cars coming into the market, but we see more and more also big electrical vehicles coming in, for example, the mining sectors where they already have first electrical vehicles. What we have seen also a bit in the report is that obviously many of these data points only will have an impact from 2030 onwards. So from a report perspective, we obviously focus strongly around what is from today till 2030, because that's really where we can move the needle to go back on track. And another element is as well what we see is that the efficiency level of an electrical car is, as per also a McKinsey research, more than 95%. And that's huge if you compare this to the normal traditional cars that we have. So in transportation, there is quite some uplift possible. It could go faster, yes, but it's great. We have also companies like DHL part of the movement, and they are also in their front run on making there a difference. And therefore, I'm really looking forward where this journey will bring us. Also there's just the sky is the limit in optimizing this. And that does not always need to be going fully into electric. I mean, there are other technologies, especially when we go to the more heavy vehicles, that will be then a combination of both. And again, there, if you understand what you have already, then you can start optimizing and you can make the right decisions to invest in the right energy efficient solutions that is out there.
So keeping on the theme of electricity and looking at the industrial powertrains, Mike, I know this is covered in your report on point 4 and 5, I believe. And here we have some key areas around high efficiency motors and variable speed drives, right? And this is also very topical. How and why are these so important to really driving towards net zero?
Yeah, let me first start with the electrical motors and the usage of high efficient motor. So as per the data from the IEA, electric motors, they consume more than 45% of world's electricity. Two-thirds out of it is coming from the industrial space. So there's a huge opportunity in there. If you go from a lower efficient class motor to a higher efficient class motor, the energy saving can be easily reduced by around 10%. Even the return on invest can be very short, because if you take a 2.2 kilowatt motor, so these are these little motors that you use in air conditioners and so on. If you invest there into a higher efficient class motor, the return on invest is between 7 and 8 months. So it's also from a financial perspective can be very attractive to invest into more efficient motors. If we would sum this up, what is the impact in terms of financial values? Mm-hmm. So the motor as such, they would by 2030 would have a benefit of around $45 billion just by equipping from a lower to a higher efficient motor. So if we look now this from a frequency converter, so the so-called VSTs, the variable frequency converters or variable speed drives, depending a bit from where you're looking at, they are actually used to optimize the motor to be even a better fit with your powertrain in your entire process. So a motor and the frequency converter can be used for pumps and fans. These are kind of the obvious cases. But even for constant torque or loads, they can be used to reduce the wear and tear part. If you equip and invest into a frequency converter, you can more or less optimize your entire energy efficiency by around 15%, sometimes even up to around 30%. So it's a huge potential also on that side, how you can improve your overall efficiency. So if you look at it from a number perspective, it's equal to around 140 million tons of CO2 emissions, and which is also roughly around 20 billion in terms of dollars. So there is a huge potential by just doing these two elements, motor, high efficient, and frequency converter. And even there, the return on invest is usually between 2 to 3 years on the powertrain system. So great opportunities there, and the technology is today already available. And just maybe to add at the end, today only around 20% of the motors that are getting shipped are equipped with a frequency converter. We expect by 2030 it will be around 40%, but it's a huge possibility there to also make an impact today already.
Huge opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
Huge opportunities for the future. So shifting gears from transportation to buildings, which is something that's very near and dear to my heart, because as you know, I come from the Smart Buildings division in electrification. And I know that in buildings, we have huge focus on the built environment, right? And how we're really driving energy efficiency there. And maybe here we could ask Brian to really help us around some technology innovations that will help us to really expand on meeting those targets when it comes to energy efficiency in buildings. Brian, is there any insights you'd like to share here?
Well, let me start by saying that there's a huge opportunity that involves no innovation whatsoever, because the majority of homes that are built today as we speak will have no energy efficiency standards applied to them whatsoever. It's still a shock every time I say that there's a huge amount of buildings being built to very poor energy standards, despite the fact that their lifetime needs for energy, their lack of energy security, their higher running costs, their lower levels of health and comfort are being locked in now for decades. It's still happening all around us in many parts of the world. In other parts of the world, there are very good energy standards, and that's great to see. We need to make sure they're properly enforced. We need to make sure they're kept up to date. And of course, as your question implies, innovation, particularly around digitalization, smart controls, building energy management systems, is really unlocking the next generation of savings, not just in terms of how much energy can be saved in the building, but thinking about the building as part of the energy system, and particularly thinking about efficient grid interactive buildings, thinking in terms of buildings as active parts of an energy system of the future. There are times of the day in many energy systems now where electricity is cheap and clean, maybe even free. There are other times, just a few hours later, where in the same system, the electricity is expensive and very polluting. And if demand flexibility and demand response and buildings and other energy using assets can be part of an active, smart, intelligent system, optimizing, using the energy when it's cheap and clean, not needing so much energy when it's not cheap and clean. If we can think about it in that systems way, we're going to not just make our buildings more sustainable, but make the entire system sustainable. Think about buildings freeing up energy supply for other uses. Think about buildings making it possible that energy systems don't need to be as big because the peaks aren't as big. Think about energy systems that actually can feed back power in for other uses at crucial times. I would say this is not only a good thing, but to be frank, there is no way we can deliver our goals around electrification of heat and electrification of transport if we don't do it in this smart and intelligent way, because otherwise the burdens we'll create on our need to build grids, build electricity systems, create risk around massive peaks in demand, whether it's charging electric vehicles or powering heat pumps at certain times of the day, powering ACs at certain times of the day, is just not achievable in the time frames we have unless we do it in an intelligent way. And so smart buildings, smart appliances, smart systems are absolutely central to our sustainable energy systems of the future.
So, Brian, you've mentioned quite a bit of pockets of innovation there, and I think that will really help us as we evolve into this energy transition journey that we're in. And perhaps, Julian, we do know that there's some pitfalls and some risks here, right? And I think it'll be good to hear from you if you see, what are those potential risks and pitfalls when we think about launching some pilots in the road to achieving this energy efficiency across some of the elements that Brian has mentioned, and maybe just how are we going to actually get there in terms of some of these risks and addressing them?
Yeah, so I think you're taking it in a degree of growing degree of complexity, because I think transportation, at least road transportation, the solution to decarbonize is quite known, and the improvement in efficiency. A car is a car, so you can create standards, increase the standards, and drive that through policies. Building starts to be a bit more complex, even though you have standards. It's a bit more complex because you look at ecosystems. Brian highlighted it. Then you have to be a bit smarter in a way you run your buildings in order to drive efficiency. There is a certain standard that works, and then on the top of that, you will have to have more ecosystems type of thinking, like Brian has mentioned. When it comes to industry, that's a little bit harder, right? It's not technological risk because the solutions exist. It's not financial pitfall because that's very good payback. I think Mike has given some very good example of that. I see two potential risks. The first one is that we apply in industry a one-size-fits-all approach, where a standard will be applied to every industries that, independently of where they are located, independently of their processes, there might be a lot of variations. So we are a bit more in favor, as Alfa Laval in the energy efficiency movement, I believe also that of this Darwinian pressure that, help the industry to find their solutions by themselves, not trying to impose one solution to a copper producer in Finland, or a carbon capture company in Germany. They will have very, very different reality. So I think that's the first pitfall. The second one is probably organizational. If you don't have the right approach in terms of starting with the audit, creating the buy-in from the organization, training your staff in order to identifying the right opportunity, I think that's you're probably going to ending up driving the wrong priorities or the wrong improvement. All will be good, but they might not be the best one. So I think the guide, and Brian also alluded to this, structured approach, but the playbook is giving that structured approach on how do you start from the audit and how do you lay down the foundation in a stepwise manner in order to get the benefit and sustain them over time. The last element that I would like to mention is everyone is talking about 2050, right? That's, at least for most of the countries, that's the date we have committed. That's 27 years from now, where we have to completely rebuild an energy system that was built on the energy mix we know today over 200 years. And we don't really have the right to make mistake here. We have to build it right from the start. So building energy efficiency or energy efficient solutions for the clean fuels and molecules, the hydrogen, the carbon capture, should also be really embedded in the line of thinking that we have here as we are rebuilding the energy system. It's very important that we do upgrade the existing industries as much as we need also to secure that we do and develop the right solution from the start in the clean fuels and molecules.
And I see, Laura Marie, you nodding quite a bit in terms of some of the comments mentioned by Julian. I believe lots of agreeing going there, and I'm going back to data and the key theme that comes through from many of your messages here. So, democratizing data within the industrial and commercial operations. I feel as though we can really gather and extract some insights here and maybe take some more action effectively. And do you agree, given what Julian just mentioned, and going back to also some of your previous comments and points around data?
Yeah, I mean, well, listen, I think that depends on whether you've done your data homework, I'd say. So, whether without really getting your data in order first, right? And I think that's important to take a step back here. You won't actually have the foundation that's needed to unlock these types of insights, to unlock these types of cost savings we're talking about, to unlock these new revenue streams with AI, right? It all starts with aggregating that operational, financial, environmental data all into one unified data estate. Because once you have those data foundations in place, right, the killer app for this new wave of generative AI are co-pilots. And co-pilots essentially assist humans, they augment humans, right? So they don't pick up a whole task, but they give you a foundation to get started with, say, a report on your energy mix or an offer to a customer, and then helped you with prompts to insights you didn't even know you should be looking for. So say if anything seems off and not in line with your energy efficiency targets, the system will automatically prompt you and flag any anomalies. Think about it, right? Garbage in is garbage out. It's really a human problem at the core, not just a tech problem. So with generative AI, we can now fix what was simply unimaginable before, namely help the person on the local factory floor who might not be very IT savvy, might simply ask the question, well, what tag should I be using for the data I'm inputting? Is it energy? Is it carbon? Is it water? Is it waste? So really empowering organizations to do things more accurately, but with less cost and less time to value. And so, Sumaya, you used the word democratizing, right? And that's spot on, I find, because AI really democratizes the way we use computers to our advantage. We can now express ourselves in natural language, and if you think of it, we can do things that before only programmers could do. Brian talked about the built environment and needing smart systems to hit our goals fast enough. So especially in industry operations, right, there's a lot of data that is proprietary and use case specific, and you can't find it on the internet. So with Gen AI, this can now be 10x more efficient. And it might just help accelerate that organic Darwinian pressure that Julian alluded to. And that's really the magic here, right? Because that's your foundation to become more energy efficient faster, but at a fraction of the cost and with a significantly lower human error rate than, say, if you were to tackle this with only a pair of human eyes on it. So to Mike's point, right, on what are the financial implications of all of this?
Yeah, I think all really, really great and relevant points. There's one thing maybe we haven't really touched on, which is the return on investment here. And maybe, Julian, let's think about it from your perspective when we look at the millions of assets that we have in both the industrial as well as the commercial world. This could be both a challenge as well as an opportunity. When we think about technology debt, obviously some challenge there, but when we think about opportunity, we also see how technologies are maturing, right? And how we can use some of the technologies to help us evaluate how we consume energy. So how can companies harness their physical assets to really drive the return on investment here?
Yeah, as you say, Sue. I mean, I'm an optimistic person. I think we all are in this room. So we see the opportunity here with all these assets. We know that the vast majority of the existing assets are either not operating anywhere to their original design conditions, or are just not maintained properly, and therefore also not operating close to their optimum position. And we have tools. I mean, Laura Marie emphasized the role of AI, and I mentioned thermal camera. We have co-developed with Microsoft an AI tool that helps to make an analysis of a thermal picture of a heat exchangers and try to understand what is happening and give a recommendation to a non-experienced service technician from a customer in order to guide him or her towards the right actions, either cleaning a heat exchanger or calling for redesign. And I think that comes to the two actions that we can have when it comes to the install base. It's either proper maintenance and improving that, and there's a lot to do here, a lot of local jobs as well. So this is really something that should be looked at by the companies and the policymakers to support, or upgrading to a newer generation. Mike gave some example on the motor. There are similar example on heat pumps, on heat exchangers, where you have had innovation and much more efficient solution to upgrade. So either maintain or upgrade. And even in the upgrade, to take the full sustainability picture, there has been a number of programs being launched where we also take back equipment. So we close the loop and create a circularity around the used equipments and secure that we recycle all components. I should say, finally, on the legacy assets and the existing assets, it's also good to look at your OPEX versus CAPEX budget here, because financials usually is what matters. And when you talk return on investment, that's where suddenly you can actually look at your the possibility to improve your energy efficiency, but also to improve your OPEX. And that's where a good payback comes in. In previous panel, we had bankers and the role of financial institutions. It's a very hot topic to look at what is going to the black energy and what is going to the green energy. There's less attention on what goes to energy efficiency in terms of investment. And maybe it is difficult to track. Yet at the company level, it is possible to understand how you are flagging and directing some of your capital and do capital allocation towards energy efficiency, which is again the first fuel and the most sustainable source of energy that we can have. So it is something that when we look at the existing assets, it's an opportunity, because you can already look at what are your gains in terms of OPEX at the same time where you're contemplating your investment.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that, Julian. I mentioned COP earlier on, and I think I'd like to spend also a moment on COP here and perhaps direct this next question to you, Brian. We know that companies will be present, most of you will be there, but I think everyone's wanting to know what's the role of policy when it comes to the industrial energy efficiency movement, right? And I think looking at governments, what is the role that they're going to take to really adopt and accelerate some of the technologies that we're going to use to really drive us towards this energy efficiency journey? So Brian, any comments that you can add here on this one?
So, of course, policy is crucial in all sectors, and everybody's looking to COP for the really important signals, and that's why it's a really important COP. We need leadership, we need the strong signals, we need an emphasis on global collaboration, and of course, we're hoping we see all of those things. But it's a complicated environment right now, still a lot of problems to solve in the coming weeks and days. but we hope we achieve that. I think in the industry and among the businesses, and I'm hearing it today, there's already a lot of leadership that stands even with or without policy. There are people who see the strategic value in what we're talking about, see the existing business case, understand the risks in inaction, which I think is the phase we're in now. As Julian said, it's 27 years to 2050. It's 7 years to 2030. Businesses are making decisions now that understand the world is changing, the world of energy, climate, sustainability, technology, and they understand the risks of inaction very well. So I think we are seeing a lot of leadership from business, from industry that I hope and I think will continue. But of course, we need that level playing field that comes from policy. We need that enabling environment. We need correct pricing. We need enabling measures and enabling structural measures like policies and regulation, and we need that signal. So I think COP is a really important moment for all of us.
And it'll be great to see, the messages coming through from there on this topic and how we can also be at the forefront of trying to drive some of these actions to achieve it, right? So one of the emphasis in the report was around the business case for investment, right? So Mike, so that was either in terms of CO2 or dollars, but it's really hard to miss some of the compelling stats that you've put in there to show the payback, even if it was self-funded. So when we think about executives and approaching the issue of this business case for industrial energy efficiency, it's really good to share some insights on this topic. So can you elaborate a little bit here for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we heard it also from Brian, Julia, and also from Laura Marie. We always need to start from this foundation. So if we go back also how the report is built up in these very three simple pillars about building the foundation, driving efficiency returns, and then getting insights from the efficiency. So I would just really start from this foundation. You need to know what you have already today. Is your asset sized in the right way? And can it be connected already through IoT? So once you have this already, I think then you are ready to start. Another important topic is also, obviously, when you look into it, is that you need to look at it from a more holistic perspective. So don't look at it from how can I optimize now this little asset in my corner here or that little asset. It needs to come basically top down as a transformational journey on how do you want to drive it today moving forward to save energy. And I think the beauty of it is obviously for this you don't really need regulations. You can do it with your own assets that you have today. And it does not even sometimes, or it does not interrupt too much your operation, depending a bit on what you're doing. But I think if you already do this properly, then you already will have the gains and the insights that is required to take it to the next level. So that would be really the simple answer. Go into the report and look into these first activities around setting your own foundation.
Thank you very much, Mike. And we've come to the end, but I do want to pose one more question to all of you, actually. I think there's a common theme coming through in terms of connecting, whether it's connecting via devices, connecting via your customers, connecting within your organization, connecting assets that you've also just mentioned now. But it's really important that we look at potential new ways of collaborating across both industrial and commercial ecosystems, right? And I think what's fascinated me is to see how everybody across the industry, different sectors, different parts of the world, and even competitors are actually willing to collaborate and even crossing the aisle to share ideas, right, on driving towards this energy efficiency movement and this journey that we are all on. What's the potential for moving faster to these through these kinds of connections, as I mentioned? Let's kick off with you, Mike, and then we'll go over to Julian, Lara, and then Brian and hear from each of them.
I think I would not now like to express it in terms of dollars or impact. I think it's really being part of a positive change, being part of a greater environment that we can all contribute. And for this, the energy efficiency movement can provide really this baseline. It can provide this platform where, as you mentioned, competitors can cross the aisle. And I'm really excited looking also forward how we can develop the energy efficiency movement to become a voice of industries for the greater good. And obviously at the end also at promoting technologies that are today already available and driving its impact. Beside this, we are working now already also on next reports and researches so that we can help each other. I mean, the IEA provides a lot of great data, and we will complement from our side as well. And I think this is at the end, it's a good win-win situation for the greater good to meet the targets by first 2030, and then the second one would be obviously by 2050.
Thank you, Mike. Julian, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you see in the movement and through Mike, I mean the positive attitude and the optimism, the great teamwork as well that is built into that, and a sense of urgency, a sense that we need to act here and now. One element I would like to maybe put a bit more emphasis on, I've already mentioned it earlier, is competence. Our young engineers, they would like to be expert in energy efficiency, energy auditors. That's what we would need them to be in order to be able to identify what is the best way to drive energy efficiency. And this is here and now. Highlighting and lifting the competence around energy efficiency. We have some good cases with the energy efficiency movement. We're trying to highlight some case stories and guide towards the 10 actions, but also what are underlying possible solutions. But we need much more in order to be even more relevant to every industry, irrespectively of where they are located in the world. So competence is the building block that I would like to put in emphasis on going forward.
Thanks, Julian. Lara Marie.
Yeah, I mean, I can only build on that. So to Mike's and Julien's point on creating a common baseline and that importance of competence, to me, it all comes back to the power of ecosystems. So no one can do it alone. And the importance of partnerships becomes crystal clear to me at the very latest when we look at how energy efficiency targets interact with Scope 3 emissions. That includes Microsoft. Managing this requires system-level across the value chain because, let's face it, the data problem gets 10x more complicated. It's not just about your own data you need to get right, but that of your ecosystem partners as well. So everyone is dependent on each other. Now, let's be honest, there's many consortia and talking shops these days out there, but in my mind, it's then really about how are you operationalizing your partnerships in the right way. And there's a great example here with the Massive Plus initiative in Sweden. So that's a company group, a set of leaders such as Alfa Laval, IKEA, Volvo, and Microsoft, who are already part of the same value chain. Right? So they have a natural incentive for data sharing. And these companies have developed a common governance framework, starting with standardized questionnaires to make sure everybody collects the same data, right? So we can actually compare apples with apples, with the ambition of pulling it all together into a unified digital infrastructure to make data sharing easier, faster, more reliable. And I'm a firm believer of perfection is the enemy of progress. As they like to say, in my mind, it's all about being super targeted. So get started with site level energy data, a narrow chain of partners. And Samaya, as you put it, right, how do you transcend that business as usual? I think it's all about this, think big, act smart, act small approach is really when the magic happens.
Ryan, are you going to take it home for us?
Well, look, it's been great to hear all these really positive messages about what's possible and the emphasis on innovation and on new ways of doing things and on solutions. And I can tell you, I and my team, we spend our time every day working directly with governments around the world, helping them put in place better policies and programs to deliver clean energy progress faster and stronger. And they're hungry to learn from each other. They're hungry to learn from industry. So that sense of collaboration, of solutions, and what actions need to be taken is really central. So the more we can work together, learn from each other, learn about the solutions that innovative industries are coming up with, but also the policy responses necessary to deliver them in a positive way, to manage the risks and uncertainties. This really is all about collaboration if we're going to achieve our goals.
Thank you very much, everyone. Well, that brings us to the end of our session. I think it is very clear that energy efficiency is a win for both the planet as well as business profitability, with so many solutions and best practices highlighted here today. But it requires us all to act now and collaboratively. The journey to net zero is one that we have to take together. And I hope that not only was the energy efficiency report useful to you, but the phenomenal insights shared by our panelists across the world, across different organizations, inspiring you to continue to ramp up your actions. So let's continue working together for a better future for our next generations. Thank you so much for watching today, and a special thank you to all our panelists for sharing some phenomenal insights.